It arrived at 7:51 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not a phone call. Not a meeting request. Just a terse email from the Harrison family's general counsel. The subject line was chillingly precise. Resolution of minority stake. I was 2 minutes away from signing the largest distribution deal in my startup's history. I'm the chief operating officer now. Not the 19-year-old girl. My father, Walter Harrison, kicked out 15 years ago. My company was valued at over $100 million. The email demanded I sell my insignificant early stake in the company the stake Walter had given me purely for tax write-offs for a fraction of its worth. The stated reason compliance. Ahead of Walter's major deal, he was about to merge his primary firm, Harrison Capital, in a deal worth $450 million. My existence was a variable he needed to control, a liability he needed to liquidate. The email closed with a polite threat, mentioning a need for eternal silence regarding family history to protect the transaction. I looked at the legal document. Then at the news ticker on my monitor, my father, the financial patriarch, smiling, talking about integrity. It was official. My success wasn't a source of pride for my family. It was a deadline. They wanted me to stay silent for another 15 years. But the price of that silence was no longer worth it. Have you ever felt like the spare part? The necessary inconvenience in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. I wish I could say I hadn't seen it coming. But that's the beautiful lie we tell ourselves. When we are young, my life in the Harrison mansion wasn't defined by silk sheets, it was defined by spreadsheets. My sister, Vivian, was the flawless column of positive returns. I was the volatility index. I was 19 when I stood in a gas station bathroom outside my university campus, staring at 2 pink lines. Positive. The father was Jason. He was everything my parents hated. Reckless, passionate, an arts major, with huge debt, which, naturally, made him perfect to my rebellious 19-year-old self. I tracked him down to his studio apartment. When I told him, the light went out of his eyes instantly. You need to get rid of it. Chloe, he said, like ordering takeout. An abortion is the only practical solution. We're too young for this. It'll ruin my concentration for the master's program. That was the first knife turn. Watching the boy I loved turn our shared future into a personal inconvenience. I walked out without another word. The truth was, my real terror wasn't Jason. It was the 2 people who signed my tuition checks. I told them that Saturday, in my father's home office. The room smelled like polished mahogany and absolute control. Walter Harrison sat behind his 8-foot desk. Vivian stood next to him. Her expression, a mix of disgust and professional disappointment. Like I had just botched a multi-million-dollar presentation. I managed to choke out the single word pregnant. My father didn't yell. He didn't curse. Walter treated my crisis like a hostile takeover. He steepled his fingers, staring at the ceiling, calculating the damage. This is unacceptable. Chloe, he stated, his voice flat. This will damage the firm's philanthropic image. I'm up for the board of trustees position this year. Do you understand the liability you represent? Vivian stepped forward. Her perfectly tailored suit, radiating judgment. It's a simple procedure. Chloe, discreet. We've already contacted the clinic. We can schedule it for Monday. No one ever needs to know about this mistake. They demanded the abortion not because they cared about my future, but because they were protecting their brand. My well-being was secondary to the Harrison family image. I told them no. It wasn't bravery. It was sheer defiance. I looked at the 3 of them, my father, my sister, and the ex-boyfriend who had abandoned me and understood my position in their corporate family structure, zero value. Walter took a slow, deliberate breath. Very well. You have made your decision. You will not have the procedure, but you will not have our support. Pack your belongings and leave. As of this moment, you are permanently excluded from the family trust. You are not a Harrison. I will not have you embarrassing this legacy with your condition. Vivian nodded in cold agreement. My father's voice was final. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was the sound of a CEO cutting a loss. The door slammed behind me, making a financial statement more crushing than any eviction notice. I was 19, pregnant, and utterly dead to the House of Harrison. I had nowhere to go. Literally. My father's expulsion wasn't just emotional, it was financial warfare. Every card, every asset, was cut off immediately. I stood outside the steel gate of the mansion, holding one suitcase and a 5-week life inside me. The tears froze before they could fall. Crying felt like compliance. There was only one line of credit left Aunt Sharon. Sharon was my mother's sister. But they rarely spoke. Sharon and her husband, Uncle Ben, worked for nonprofits. They lived modestly, far away, and were considered fiscally unsound by Walter. They were the family outcasts. And for the first time, I knew exactly how they felt. When I called Sharon, I didn't have to finish the sentence. Through my shaky voice, she heard the entire truth. Where are you now? Sweetie, she asked. That one word, sweetie, was the first real warmth I'd felt in years. Stay right there. Ben and I are driving up. We'll be there in 12 hours. Their home was small, 2 hours outside the city, full of mismatched furniture and life. It wasn't the 20,000 square foot Harrison Fortress, but it felt safer than Fort Knox. Sharon and Ben didn't ask about the inheritance or the disgrace. They asked if I was hungry. This little room is yours for as long as you need it. Uncle Ben said, placing my cheap suitcase down, welcome home, Chloe. That word home was a resource Walter could never afford to offer. I enrolled in an online business management degree immediately. I couldn't waste time. Every hour was a financial expenditure I had to justify. I juggled night classes with morning sickness, and then quickly added a waitressing job at a local diner. Elias was born on a Tuesday morning. I held him, tiny and perfect, and realized my entire perspective had inverted. My father prioritized balance sheets. I prioritized this small, vulnerable life. This was my new portfolio. The next 15 years were a blur of calculated risk and relentless execution. Sleep became a luxury. Textbooks became my constant companions. Every assignment I completed, every dollar I saved, was a direct rejection of Walter's prophecy that I would fail. Sharon and Ben were my co-founders. They didn't fund my education with money, but with the intangible capital Walter valued more unconditional belief. They volunteered to watch Elias so I could study for midterms, sacrificing their own time and energy freely. By the time Elias was 10, I had graduated, earned my master's, and founded a small software company with a college friend. By the time I received Walter's demanding email 15 years later, I was the chief operating officer of a thriving, high-value tech company. I didn't owe my career to Walter's connections or money. I owed it to the resilience forged in that small diner, funded by minimum wage, and sanctified by the smell of my son's head. My entire found family structure was built on integrity, something the Harrison empire only offered as a paid-up feature. Walter lived in a world of zeros and ones, success and failure. My success was the living, breathing proof that his entire financial model of life was fundamentally flawed. That difference was the real capital I brought to the table, and that capital was about to bankrupt him. I accepted the meeting. Not because I thought they might offer a real apology, but because I needed to look them in the eye. I needed to see exactly where the fear lived. The meeting was held in my father, Walter Harrison's, private penthouse office. It was a space designed to radiate power, with views stretching over the financial district like a map of his conquests. Vivian was already there, looking exactly like the perfect daughter, flawless, composed, and radiating cold efficiency. Walter didn't stand up. He gestured to a chair opposite him with a flicker of impatience. "Chloe, I trust you received the documents from counsel? We need your signature today." I didn't sit. I remained standing, forcing him to crane his neck slightly. I received the documents. "Father, I don't believe they accurately reflect the value of my 15 years of independent work." He sighed, the sigh of a CEO annoyed by a minor compliance issue. "Don't be dramatic. We're offering you $750,000. That's more than fair for a dormant minority stake. Considering how the initial funding was acquired, that child, Elias, was a risk, a massive risk to the family brand. Elias is a thriving high school student and the grandson you chose to disinherit. My company is valued at over $100 million, not $750,000. But let's skip the small talk. Walter, why the rush?" That's when Vivian cut in, her voice low and sharp. "It's about the merger. Chloe, the $450 million deal. It's too high profile. We can't have your situation becoming a footnote in the due diligence process. We need a clean narrative." Then, the door opened. Jason walked in. The boy who abandoned me 15 years ago. He was wearing a suit Walter must have paid for, his face smoother. But his eyes still held that self-serving weakness. I remembered. He was Vivian's husband now. The ultimate insult. Jason avoided my gaze, addressing only Vivian and Walter. He was working for Walter now, somehow involved in securing this massive deal. That's when the secondary twist snapped into place. Jason hadn't married Vivian for love. He married the Harrison name, Chloe. "You need to be reasonable," Jason chimed in, leaning on the mahogany table. "Vivian and we can't have children. Your son is a potential complication. We need clean ties. I have too much riding on this deal to have your drama surfacing now." It wasn't just Walter demanding my silence. It was Jason trying to use the family he abandoned to save the career he couldn't build. They were terrified. The Harrison facade was so delicate that my self-made success and the existence of my son were considered a demolition threat. They were asking me to sell my freedom and erase my past just to protect their fragile status. "You're right," I said, finally sitting down, my voice quiet but firm. "It is about a clean tie. And I'm not signing. I'm going to clean up more than just my stake. Walter, I'm going to clean up the entire Harrison portfolio of lies." I stood up and walked toward the door. I left them staring at the documents, already feeling the fear that I had just signed a different kind of document, a declaration of war. I couldn't leave it there. My father, Walter Harrison, wasn't just attempting to erase my stake. He was attempting to erase the entire 15 years of struggle. My son, and the sacrifice of my chosen family, And he was doing it to protect a $450 million lie. The moment I left that penthouse, the clinical anger took over. I needed the final undeniable weapon. And I knew it wouldn't be about Elias. It had to be about the hypocrisy of the Harrison name itself. I immediately hired a private forensic accounting team. I didn't tell them the whole story. I just told them I was seeking any unexplained, massive disbursements from my father's numerous philanthropic funds over the last 2 decades. I gave them specific years, the year I was born, and the year my mother had her nervous breakdown. Then I called Aunt Sharon. I was pacing my own successful office. A monument built on the ashes of Walter's rejection. But I felt like that 19-year-old girl again. Sharon, I asked tightly. When I was born, was there ever a twin? A long silence. 16 years of secrets hung between us. Sharon finally whispered, Chloe, there are things Walter and your mother went to incredible lengths to hide, especially from you. I wasn't born alone. I had a twin, Holly. Holly was born severely disabled. My parents feared the stain on their perfect image more than they loved their child. They hid her in a private care facility under a coded foundation and told everyone she died. Sharon knew, but Walter threatened to destroy her, and Ben's nonprofit if she spoke. My fury sharpened into purpose. I sent a PI to trace Holly's records. The forensic accountant confirmed she was alive, living quietly in a care home funded by the Harrison Family Legacy Fund. But another discovery landed harder. $800,000 had vanished from that fund, transferred straight into Walter's company during his old financial crash. He'd stolen from his disabled daughter. That made it official. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. I gathered the records and planned my strike. The $450 million merger signing would be his stage and his downfall. When Walter began preaching integrity and legacy, I walked on stage. The crowd froze. It's not private, Walter, I said evenly. It's time to audit your legacy. I laid down the documents. 15 years ago, my father disowned me to protect his brand. But before that, he buried my twin sister alive in silence and later stole her medical trust to save himself. Gasps. Cameras flashed. I finished. This company isn't bankrupt financially, it's bankrupt morally. The value of integrity here is 0. The deal collapsed. Walter was suspended, then retired in disgrace. His empire, built on image, rotted overnight. Later, Jason called suddenly desperate to be a family. I told him Elias already had one built on love, not leverage. Then I hung up for good. With the payout from my shares, I founded the Holly Foundation Scholarships and Childcare for Single Mothers. Holly's trust was restored, and I became her guardian. Looking back, exile was my freedom. Being the family's spare part proved I had integrity they never could buy. Legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you build. It's not blood, it's choice. You don't fix the poisoned tree, you plant a new one.